Okay, for our final lesson, let's look at orchestration and arrangement. This is another massive topic, and at some point I may dedicate a class specifically to it. But my goal for right now is to give you an introduction to it and give you some tips and pointers so that you could apply some of these concepts to your own pieces. Orchestration in a traditional sense is writing or adapting music for a live orchestra. When orchestrating pre-existing music, the original notes and harmonies are kept intact and are not altered at all. An arrangement is a reimagining of an existing or new work. Arranging may involve changing harmonies, altering the tempo, and choosing the instrumentation. Orchestration and arranging are related, but they're different. For our purposes in this class, we'll be focusing on some basic concepts of orchestrating and arranging, whether or not you'll be working with a live orchestra for your piece. These concepts can really be applied to most any writing situation. When you break it down to essentials, most music, especially popular music, has two main elements to it: a melody and musical or vocal accompaniment. That idea should help you to organize and streamline any ideas you may have, and hopefully make writing a little easier and less overwhelming. In our last lesson on melody, we had two elements happening: a melody with chords as accompaniment. Another tip to keep in mind is to have your accompaniment and melody in different ranges. For example, if you have your accompaniment playing below middle C on a piano, then have your melody at a higher or a lower octave. And so on. And that way you keep your accompaniment out of the way of the melody. In that example that I played there, my melody was above middle C and my accompaniment was below middle C. Another thing to keep in mind is to have your melody at a louder dynamic or volume than your accompaniment. If you're producing a song, you could achieve this through your mix, but it should also be kept in mind when performing and recording your song. This will help to highlight your melody and bring the listener's attention to it, creating a focal point. Another concept to keep in mind, especially when mixing a track, is to think of your elements in terms of foreground, middle ground, and background. Usually your main melody would be in the foreground. Your rhythmic elements, like guitar and drums, would be in your middle ground, and any textures such as synthesizers or ambient sounds would be in the background. Again, we're trying to place the melody in the foreground and give it prominence. Also, it's good to utilize counterpoint in your music. And this is another massive topic that you could literally spend years studying. In a nutshell, counterpoint is the relationship between musical elements. For example, two human voices that are interconnected in terms of the chords and scales that are happening in the music, but are independent of each other in terms of the notes they are hitting at any given moment and their rhythmic values. That may sound kind of complicated, but let me demonstrate it and hopefully make it clearer. On my first chord, my melody in my right hand is a little busy, so my left hand, the accompaniment, is just holding down whole notes. On the next chord, again, my melody starts with kind of a busy phrase and eventually holds on the note F. When the melody is static, the left hand then plays a small descending eighth note type figure. On the next chord, again, the melody is a little busy in the right hand, so my left hand plays a whole note. On the final chord, the melody is holding down a whole note, so at the end of the phrase, my left hand plays a small chromatic eighth note figure that leads back into the A minor chord. That's a really basic intro to counterpoint, but hopefully something you can apply that'll give more clarity and interest to your music. Lastly, I want to mention song structure. This is really a part of songwriting and composing that is unique to each writer and to each writing situation. But if you're brand new to this craft, you might want to start with a simple A-B structure. A being a verse and B being a chorus. So in that example, you'd have verse 1, followed by chorus 1, followed by verse 2, followed by chorus 2. And you might want to make that second chorus 2 or 3 times as long as the first chorus, so that it also functions as an outro to your song. Again, you could really play with this depending on how long you want your song to be and where you want to take your piece. For example, you could have 3 verses instead of 2, or add in a bridge after your second chorus. But if you're just taking your first crack at writing, you might want to start with the first structure that I mentioned, the A-B structure. Also, please be aware that it's perfectly okay to use the same chord progression for the entire length of a piece. Many pop songs and film score cues use this approach. Just make sure that you keep the listener's interest through your use and development of melody, lyrics, orchestration, and arrangement.